The billionaire Peter Thiel has a question he always asks himself. How can I accomplish my 10-year plan in the next 6 months? That type of thinking is really powerful. Tim Ferriss actually adds a caveat to that. He says, how would I achieve my 10-year plan in the next 6 months if I had a gun to my head? So it's a really amazing question. If you only had 6 months to accomplish something, you would change your strategy dramatically. And if it was do or die, you'd definitely change your strategy. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how you can accomplish more in 1 year than you have in the last 10. Or put another way, how you can accomplish 10 times more in the next 12 months than you have in any other year. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share with you a slide that teaches you how motivation works. And then I'm actually going to share with you my own goals for this year. I'm filming this video at the beginning of 2021. Not sure when you're going to see this, but I'm going to use my own goal structure and share with you how to structure your goals, because there's two types of goals. There's ends goals and there's means goals. There's means and then there's ends. There's process goals and then there's outcome goals. And then there's also certain types of goals or keystone goals that can help you accomplish a ton. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you how this works. So this is a image created by the culture design company called Gaping Void, and this is based on expectancy theory. Expectancy theory is one of the core theories of motivation. And according to this theory, there are 3 steps to being highly motivated. First, you have to have a compelling goal. A compelling goal means that you desperately or genuinely want the outcome. You want it so bad that it's something you're willing to make your identity. Whatever it is you want, you can actually change your identity so that you can have it. So it could be you have $1 million. It could be you have an amazing relationship with your spouse. Whatever your goal is, it needs to be compelling to you. You have to have a why for it. You have to have a reason. As Viktor Frankl said, when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how. And that takes me to number 2. You have to have a how. So you have to have an outcome. You have to start there. What is the result you want? It has to be compelling. Then you have to have a path to getting there. And usually you start with the outcome. What is it that you specifically want? And then you have to reverse engineer the path. And you usually do that by researching it and by asking people who have already walked that path. The third thing you need is confidence that you can actually get from A to B. And that comes by usually taking steps, by clarifying the path. So you need these 3 things to have motivation. And with that said, I'm going to now share with you my goals for 2021 and how this works, and ultimately how you can structure your goals so that you can accomplish way more in 2021 or just in any 12-month period of time than you ever have before. So these are just a few of the goals I have right now. I want to add 2 to 5 million to my net worth. And I think one thing that's important is that your goals should have a range. Rather than just being so specific about a certain number, have a range, because hopefully you actually outperform your initial goal. So I have a few programs that I sell. I've got a course called AMP Gold. I've got a course called AMP Platinum. So I'll be able to make a lot of money through that. I actually have 4 book deals that I'm currently working on. I also want to get, so these are my ends goals, by the way. And I don't recommend you have more than 3 outcome goals. You want to be very specific about your outcomes, but don't have more than 3. As Jim Collins said in the book Good to Great, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. So you shouldn't have more than 3 major work goals as it relates to your life. If you have 5 to 10 goals, you're going to have too much split focus. You're not going to be in enough flow. You're going to be dealing with too much decision fatigue. There's a great quote that says, we're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. So you don't want lesser goals. You don't want too many goals. You want no more than 3 outcomes you're chasing. So for me, this is one outcome, which is to increase my net worth by 2 to 5 million. These are the means through which I'm going to do it. So these are process goals. These are the 3 outcome goals. Book deals, YouTube subscribers, publish 500 videos on YouTube, set up a powerful partnership on a book project. One of the things that I do since I'm an author is I set up co-authorships with people that I want to work with or learn from, people who can mentor me. I end up writing books with them. So just as an example, I wrote this book, Who Not How, with Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is the founder of Strategic Coach. This is the #1 entrepreneurial coaching company in the world. And Dan is very hard to get access to, but I was able to create a partnership with him because I said, Dan, I love your ideas. Do you want to do a book together? I'll write the book, and this can be something you can use to grow your business. And so I want to set up, one of my big goals is to learn real estate investing. And so I'm going to be partnering with someone who's huge in the real estate world, and I'm going to write a book with them, and I'm going to use the book to build their credibility, but I'm also going to use the book for me to be a way to learn and be a guinea pig from their best knowledge and skills. I'm going to get mentored by them. I'm going to document the process, and through the midst of that, I'm going to be quickly translated to increasing my goals. Again, going back to motivation, you need a clear outcome, you need a process or a path to getting there, and then you need to build the confidence that you can do that. Well, one of the ways you can shortcut that is by teaming and collaborating with people who are already where you want to be. You can bring something to the table. So I already know someone, for example, who's worth over $100 million, who's just a mogul in the real estate world, and he loves my books. And so he wants to do a book with me, and so I can partner with him, I can do a book with him, and ultimately that book can position him in a powerful way, but also that book can help him achieve his goals, grow his business. But through writing that book, I can learn all of his best methods, and also he can fast track me to success because I'm ultimately putting myself in the position of being his case study. I'm being his case study so that I can write and document his best methods. And so you want to put yourself in a position where you can get mentored by and collaborate with your partners. These are all of my process goals. This is my outcome. One of my other goals is just to publish 3 to 4 books and ultimately sell. This is kind of an outcome goal, but this is just something I've added. Really, the main goal is to publish 3 to 4 books. I also want to run a 100-mile ultra marathon. And this is where I'm going to get into Keystone Habit and also process stacking. So there's a concept called habit stacking in kind of the productivity world. And habit stacking is where you basically bolt on a new habit that you want to have to something that already exists. So for example, if you wake up every morning and start brushing your teeth, you know you're going to brush your teeth. That's already an established habit. But if you want to add a new habit, you want to stack that habit or link that habit to brushing your teeth. You could put a book, for example, right next to your toothbrush so that every time you start brushing your teeth in the morning, which is a habit that already exists, you've now you can pick up your book and go read 2 pages. You've now stacked 2 habits together. Well, process stacking is kind of similar. It builds on the idea of Keystone Habit, but it also builds on the idea of habit stacking. So a Keystone Habit is one thing you do that ultimately bleeds into everything else. One good example of that is journaling. If you start journaling in the morning, that one habit starts to change everything else that you're doing. It starts to make you have more emotional clarity, more mental clarity. It helps you be more motivated towards your goals, helps you to feel better. So that is one habit that positively influences all other areas of your life. Well, this is one process that bleeds into everything else I'm doing. Let me give an example. So while I'm training and running and training up for this 100-mile ultra marathon, which is going to take me hours and hours and hours, one of the things I want to do while I'm running is listening to audiobooks. Well, if I listen to 100 audiobooks, not only am I now using my time better while running, but these books fuel the books I'm writing. These books fuel the YouTube videos I'm creating. These books fuel my AMP content. AMP is an online course that I run. So this one process influences all of the outcomes I'm doing. That's why process stacking is so powerful. Now, there's something else I really want to tell you as it relates to, so here's a few of the just nuts and bolts recommendations I give you. Have no more than 3 clear outcomes you're pursuing. Define the outcomes and then think about what are the best paths or processes to getting there. There's a difference between path and outcome. The outcome is what determines the process. So don't get those things mixed up. A lot of people, they're overly they're overly process focused, but what matters more than the process is the outcome. There's a great quote from Tim Grover. He said, when you want the result bad enough, you'll do whatever's involved in getting it. Again, when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how. And people who are highly adaptive, they're willing to change their process in order to get the outcome that they want. They're willing to unlearn old ways. And I highly recommend you get very clear on the outcome, reverse engineer the best process, and then team with someone who's already got the outcome you want so that they can streamline you there. That'd be kind of like a way of slipstreaming. Slipstreaming is a powerful method. So in cycling, slipstreaming is when a cyclist is riding in front and there's a rider right behind him, and all of the air pressure is being pushed by the person in front, and so it pulls the rider in the back. Slipstreaming is a way to cheat time. I actually wrote a book way back in the day called Slipstream Time Hacking. And so working with mentors and people who are already where you want to be and, obviously incentivizing them to help you is a very fast way to save years or decades of time. Now, there's a super important concept that I want to share with you because this is called The Gap in the Gain. This is a book by Dan Sullivan. He's who I wrote Who Not How with, and Dan Sullivan and I are actually turning The Gap in the Gain into a major book with Hay House. It actually comes out in October of 2021. But the reason I'm bringing up The Gap in the Gain is this. You will never be happy if you're in what Dan calls the gap. The gap is when you're comparing or measuring your current self against some ideal that doesn't exist. So obviously you want to have goals. You want to have a future you're striving for. But if you're always measuring yourself against those ideals or measuring yourself against some other people, so the world is always pushing things into your face. You're hearing all sorts of things, you need to be attractive, you need to be a millionaire, you need to do all these different things. You are being pushed and bombarded, and so you're creating these constant comparisons. And you will never, there's a great quote, the comparison is the thief of joy. If you're comparing or measuring yourself against anything external or against even your own future ideals, you will never be happy. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. If you're in the gap, you will not be happy. That's basically the idea of you're always pursuing the next thing. You're always hoping that happiness is around the next corner. There's a lot of high performers and a lot of people who are successful who are very sad, and they will never be happy, even though they think that once they accomplish that next thing, they'll never be happy. And so an important thing to recognize is that the only way to be happy and the only way to accurately measure yourself is by measuring who you are right now versus who you were in the past. That's the only way to accurately measure where you're at right now. Dan calls that being in the game. So basically, rather than measuring yourself against your goals, you want to obviously have clear goals, have clear timelines, and then courageously pursue those. But you want to reflect on where you were before. Take the time to accurately measure your gains. So for example, my 2020 key outcomes were I published 2 books, one of them being Personality Isn't Permanent, one being Who Not How. And both of those books were successful. I also had our 6th child. Baby Rex was born. I got 4 book deals for future books, donated more than I've ever donated to my church, invested more into my long-term future than I've ever invested. The only reason I bring this up is this. It's easy for me to go in the gap. And even though this was potentially the biggest year of my life, speaking of 2020, I left 2020 to some degree feeling slightly unsatisfied. And I was thinking about all the areas where I didn't do what I could do. So when you're in the gap, you might get like an A- on a test and you'll only focus on like the 2 problems you missed. You won't appreciate that you actually got 98% right, And so what you want to do if you want to be happy is look back on what you did and appreciate what you did, take stock in what you did. So I highly recommend you pull out your journal and actually document all the things that you actually accomplished last year and then frame it as a gain and always just compare yourself against your former self. That could be from a year ago. It could be from 3 months ago. Every 3 months, you could actually measure the progress, measure the gains. And that's really the only thing you want to measure yourself against. You use your vision of your future self to set specific, tangible goals, have your 3 outcomes, courageously chase those goals. But every 3 months, you've made amazing progress, then measure yourself against where you were before. There's a lot of people who have this wrong. Like, for example, James Clear, who I love, he's got this amazing book called Atomic Habits, but one thing he said very incorrectly is he said that goals lead to unhappiness. That's not true. The reason James is unhappy with goals is because he's in the gap. Every time he accomplishes a goal, he's measuring himself against some external indicator. He's not measuring himself against where he was before. If you're in the gain, then goal setting becomes really beautiful. You need goals because the goal shapes your process. The goal gives you direction. And as you courageously chase your goals, then even if you didn't quite get there, you still made progress. For example, if you're at 0 and your goal's at 10, but you only get to 8, if you're in the gap, you're only thinking about the 2 you missed. If you're in the gain, you realize you're now farther than you were before. And from this new launch pad, you can actually go way beyond maybe what you initially imagined. So goals do not create unhappiness. Unhappiness comes because of what you're measuring yourself against. And if you're always measuring yourself against ideals that don't exist or measuring yourself against someone else's standard for success or happiness, if you're always comparing yourself to other people, you can't be happy no matter what you accomplish. But goals are not what make you unhappy. Goals are essential to success. Goals are essential to creating a process. Goals are essential to directing your life and taking ownership of who you are. The only reason you're unhappy is because you're not measuring yourself correctly. The only way to measure yourself correctly in order to be happy is to measure your current self against where you were before. And that's the only really genuine and accurate way you can measure yourself against reality. And by doing that regularly, not only do you get excited about how much progress you've made, but you get more and more excited to make more progress. BJ Fogg, the Stanford psychologist, he wrote an amazing book right here called Tiny Habits. One of the things that he talks about is that celebration is essential to forming habits. Emotions are actually what create habits more than repetition. And emotions come when you actually feel successful at what you're doing. And so celebrating small wins or big wins is crucial to reinforcing doing more of the thing you want to do. And so it's crucial to look back on where you were before, to measure your gains, to measure your progress, and to compare yourself against your former self. As Ernest Hemingway said, nobility is not being superior to other people. Nobility is about being superior to your former self. If you take time regularly to measure yourself against where you were before, you're going to feel excitement. It's going to give you more excitement to set more goals, because when you set more goals and then you actively chase them, you're going to be making gains. And then you obviously, wherever you land, you compare it to where you were before and you'll see the progress. That'll give you confidence. It'll give you learning. It'll give you capability because you courageously pursued your goal. Every time you set a new goal, you've got to courageously chase it because the goal is above your current capability. As Dan says, confidence is built by making progress towards goals that are above your current capabilities. You're setting goals up here that are above your current confidence and capability, so it takes commitment and courage. It takes you courageously pursuing it. Whatever progress you make, you look back, you compare it against your former self, and you're like, holy cow, I've made huge progress. So that is ultimately how you can accomplish 10 times more. You set 3 clear outcomes, you set high quality processes, you ultimately team with people who are already where you want to be, and ultimately let them slipstream you there. And all the while you're measuring yourself against your former self, not against anyone else. I don't care what anyone else thinks of my own results, because the only person I'm comparing myself is my former self. And I'm really clear that I don't need anyone else's approval, and you don't need anyone else's approval either. And so that allows you to healthily measure yourself against yourself so that you can then be happy versus never being happy because you're constantly measuring yourself against something that doesn't exist, some ideal that's out there, or someone else, which who knows what their actual goal is. You don't want to actually constantly mimic and compare yourself to other people, because chances are when you get to know them, you might be disappointed. There's a great quote that says, never meet your heroes, because when you do, you end up being disappointed. Your heroes probably don't have the same ultimate goals that you have. You can learn from them. For example, I can learn from an author about how to write better, but I don't want to necessarily overly mimic them because my goals at the end of the day might not be the same as theirs. My values at the end of the day might not be theirs. Robert Keegan was a Harvard psychologist, and he came up with a 3-stage model of conscious evolution, which is very powerful. And as you watch this video, I want you to think, where are you in these 3 stages? So here's a picture that basically depicts it. The first stage is what Keegan called the socializing mind. This is stage 3. This is the lowest level. This is about where 58% of the global population is. And what the socialized mind is basically it's a very dependent self. You're dependent on others. You believe that you are who you're around. And so this is where a lot of high school people are. They're very much overly identified with their friend group. They're overly trying to fit in. And so they're dependent on those around them. And their identity and their self-worth and their self-image is based on how other people see and treat them. And they're very much trying to be liked. And so they don't really have an identity. They're more a chameleon, and they're just trying to socialize. They're trying to fit in. They're dependent on others. They don't have their own identity. They don't have their own worldview. They don't have their own goals. They're overly operating out of fear and trying to be accepted. And because they're trying so hard to be accepted, they don't actually have any grounding as a person. They don't have any principles or perspectives. So the next stage up is what Keegan would call the self-authoring mind. And this is where you start to develop your own sense of self, your own identity, your own worldview. You have your own belief structure. You stop being so driven by fear, and instead you start being driven by principles or by values or by goals, even if those are not created by yourself, even if those were just subconsciously planted by your environment or by your culture or by your family. But even still, you now have your own goals, and you now do everything you can to pursue those goals. You only engage in relationships that fit those goals. You also only engage and encounter information that fits with your worldview. And you also believe that your worldview is correct. You believe that it is accurate. So you see the world through a lens. It's your lens. As Dr. Stephen R. Covey said, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. When you're at the self-authoring stage, you believe that your worldview is correct. You believe that it's accurate. You believe that how you see the world is accurate, is objective, is correct. And so it's at this stage that you are very goal-centric. You're very focused on what you can accomplish. You're also very self-centered. Everything you do is to improve yourself or to move yourself in the direction you want to go. And this is where a higher level of people go. This is where a higher 35% of people go. This is a stage of high independence. You become very independent. And this is a stage that America really pushes for. We love independence. We love having this idea of controlling your destiny, of being the author of your own narrative, and that's great. It can get you far. This stage can get you far. This stage can get you rich. This stage can get you successful, but it has insane limits, because it stops you from transforming your filter regularly. Instead, you become overly tied to your worldview. You become dogmatic. You become black and white, and you stop overly putting yourself in new situations and consuming information and putting yourself around new types of people that would challenge your filter. So this is, although a very strong place, it's also a very fragile place, because in order to maintain this authoring perspective, you've got to surround yourself with people who are just like you, and that stops you from ultimately evolving at the highest level. Which takes me to this third stage, which is what Keegan calls the self-transforming mind. And from his perspective, this is where only 1% of the population gets to. And when you're at this higher stage, you do have a worldview. You are still independent, but you seek interdependence. You seek relationships for the purpose of transformation. So at this self-authoring stage, you are mostly engaging in transactional relationships. You engage in relationships, and as long as they fit, as long as they work, it's quid pro quo, then you'll stay in it. But as soon as the relationship gets over tilted, or as soon as things start to get uncomfortable, you get away. At the self-transforming stage, you actually engage in relationships for the purpose of learning and being transformed. Often there's conflict, but it's healthy conflict. The psychologist Brent Slife said that it's often engaging in conflict that increases intimacy, if both parties are committed either to the same cause or to the relationship itself. And so you're not afraid of a conflict of worldview. You're not afraid of engaging in differences. And both parties come together. They both have different perspectives. They have different goals, but they come together for a shared purpose, a transformational relationship. And they know that through the relationship, all parties will be transformed. All parties will change. They don't know precisely what the future will be, but they know the future will be better than the present. They do have visions and goals, and they can create shared goals, but they also know that through the collaboration, all parties will be changed. And when you're at this stage of mental thinking, you do have a worldview, but you can also step outside of that worldview, and you can look at it as an outside observer, and you can think about it, and you can look at other views of the world, and you can then deal with competing principles. There's a great quote that basically says that it is the rate of a high intelligence to be able to have two competing ideas in your mind at the same time and still be able to function. There's a lot of paradox. There's even a theory called paradox theory, and that's where you can deal with conflict, because when you're growing and moving forward and learning new things and achieving new things, often you'll realize that your views actually conflict with different views. When you're at the self-authoring stage, you want everything to be perfect, everything to be in harmony. You don't want any conflict. Whereas as you're at the transforming stage, you can deal with paradox. You can even deal with self-contradiction. You can also realize that one view can only take you so far. And so you're constantly seeking to adapt, evolve, and transform your view through relationships. And that actually takes me to a separate theory, which is called the self-expansion model. And basically what the self-expansion model shows is that we as people, our identity and our capability and even our worldview is based on the relationships we have. And so when you start engaging in new and powerful relationships and seeking new experiences, you start to transform as a person. Your capabilities start to transform. And so then you start to think, well, who are the types of people I want to relate to who can help me transform my thinking, who can help me think more powerfully? And so you as a person can expand, you can change, you can transform, but you've got to be willing to step outside the independent authoring mind, and you've got to step into the self-transforming mind where you're flexible and open towards change, where you engage in interdependent relationships and transformational relationships with the sake of learning and growth. Now, to keep this super practical, if you are someone who is highly independent and you've got to do things your way, and you think that your way is the correct way, you can start to see that that would lead to unhealthy relationships. People won't want to be around you if it's your way or the highway, if your way is always correct, if your thinking is always right, and they should believe exactly what you believe, or else they shouldn't be in your ecosystem. Also, you can't go very far if you feel like you've got to do everything yourself. If your goals and your vision is based purely on what you can do yourself, and you doing it the correct way and no one else can do it better than you, then you're very limited. But if you start playing in the collaboration game and in the transforming mind and in that game, then you can start to relate to people who have totally different views than you. They've got totally different skills and capabilities than you, and you can create bigger visions for the future, and you can let each other be in each other's realms while at the same time respecting each other's differences. You can play what Dan Sullivan would call who, not how. You can let the who do the how. You can start creating new and powerful games where the game itself changes you. If you're willing to have many identities, many roles. For example, I have many roles. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm also an author, I'm a collaborator, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a child of God. I've got multiple roles, and within those roles, I'm essentially a different person. And sometimes what I would do in one role, I wouldn't do in another. But all of those roles transform me. And I seek those transformational relationships. I seek connection. As you connect with other people, as you learn from them, as you strive and grow together, you will be changed. And I'm just telling you from experience. I've learned to create collaborations with people who are where I want to be or who I want to learn from, and I'm blown away by the organic, unconscious process of how my life evolves, of how my life transforms at an external level as I allow myself to let go of my ego, as I allow myself to let go of my current identity, and as I allow myself to not overly identify with my mental filter, but as I question and I'm open to new ideas. And as I learn and be humble, and as I seek to help other people. That's one of the keys of the transforming mind, by the way, is that you have to be a giver, not a taker. At the self-authoring stage, you're a taker. You'll give or match, as Adam Grant would say, you'll give or match to the extent that it's equal, but at the self-transforming mind, there's nothing but gratitude and giving and no keeping score. And you're giving and you're generous and you want to help other people. You want to help various people. I've learned that by giving, not taking, there's a great quote from Zig Ziglar. He said that you can get anything you want in life if you help enough people get what they want. At the self-transforming mind stage, you're a giver far more than you're a taker. Yes, you receive, and you receive abundantly, but your main orientation is toward giving, toward serving, toward gratitude, toward grace, and toward transformation. And as you help various people, and as you learn humbly from them, and as you have your worldview altered, adjusted, improved, then you'll regularly have the experience of reflecting on your former self, of who you were a year ago, and you're shocked at how much you have changed. I love the quote from Josh Waitzkin. Josh Waitzkin is the learning expert, and he always asks himself, what did I believe 3 months ago that I no longer believe today? He is transforming regularly. And as you engage in transformational relationships, as you're a giver, as you seek learning, as you humbly let go of some of your lower level views to accept higher level principles, which may currently conflict with how you see the world, you will be shocked that you'll be able to create 10 times, 100 times the outcomes as you could from the dogmatic, the self-centered, the selfish, the taker mindset, and the highly independent self of the authoring mind. So that is the 3-stage process. My invitation to you is to be willing to have new experiences, to seek transformational relationships with people you want to learn from, to humbly learn from them, and to seek to give, to make it about them, not you, to ask the question, what's in it for them, to see how you can help other people get what they want. And by extension, you will organically and naturally get more than what you want. You will become a massive, abundant receiver as you become a intentional, humble, genuine giver to the right people. And as you are a humble learner, you will be shocked at how far you go, at how much you transform, and at how much you can change. You can change. You are not a fixed entity. Your future self will be a fundamentally different person than you. And if you take the self-expansion model seriously, that who you are is based on the relationships you have, that if you start engaging in higher tier relationships, and if you're open to being transformed, and if you're open to giving and serving, you will have many peak experiences, many subconscious enhancing experiences, and over time you will be stunned and shocked by how far you go. You'll stop caring about the things your former self cared about. You'll stop being petty. You'll stop needing to be right. You'll start being humble. You'll learn. You'll have lots of hard learning experiences, peak experiences, but you'll become anti-fragile as a result. You'll be flexible, because relationships that are based on trust, collaboration, mutual respect, and giving, they can handle some shakes. They can handle challenges, and they can become better, not bitter. They can go places that you could never go on your own. So I guess, which stage are you at, and which stage do you want to be? Are you willing to engage in transformational relationships that could take you 10 times or 100 times further and faster than if you just have to reinvent the wheel yourself and do it all on your own? You can leapfrog. You can quantum leap. When if your future self is up here and there's people already up here, and if you just relate to them and help them and serve them, they will warp you up there. Bill Gates said that most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and they underestimate what they can do in a decade. That same principle, though, can be scaled down. Most people underestimate what they can do in 1 year and they overestimate what they can do in a single day. Most people, they try to do so much in one day and it leads them to constantly feeling like failures. They've got like 50 things on their to-do list. They're burning themselves out they're overly stimulated. They're not sleeping well, and ultimately that leads to poor performance. If you're not trying to take over the world in one day, and instead you realize, look, if I can get into a consistent pattern, a consistent system, a consistent routine, I can just make powerful progress on a daily basis, then I can stop, recover, let it go, because I'm playing the long game. If you play the long game and are consistent for a long period of time, you're going to have huge compounding effects. And so rather than trying to overestimate what you can do in a single day, get really good at finding that sweet spot. Apply the 80-20 principle. 80% of results come from 20% of what you do. Don't have 50 things on your daily to-do list. Have 2 or 3 really important things, important and not urgent. Wake up, get to your important activities, eat the frog, as they would say, put the worst first, and knock those things out. Get yourself 2 to 4 or 5 hours of really good flow, then just fully recover and allow yourself to enjoy your life. If you try to accomplish too much in one day, then you're probably short-term thinking. If you have a long-term vision and a long-term plan and you're playing the long game, which means you're playing your own game, you've set your own game, you're excited about that game, then you can really get deep into the process. Then you can get deep into doing what you want to do and stop trying to prove yourself to others. Stop trying to get to the next level. You can play your own game right now. So here's the basics of how to do it. Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, said that if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. First off, you set the long-term vision. What is the game you're actually playing? And then from there, you just get into a rhythm of finding the sweet spot of how much you can do in a single day. And then once you're done, just let it go. Be done. Psychologically detach from work. There's a lot of research on this. You want to psychologically detach from work, meaning you're comfortable walking away. Even the author Ernest Hemingway would walk away mid-sentence. He didn't need to finish that sentence. He would write for a period of time, and then he would end midway through a sentence so that he left himself a space to start tomorrow. Tomorrow, he could come, and he's already halfway through the sentence, so he can make it an easy, quick win and get momentum for tomorrow. Give yourself permission to celebrate and to walk away. You've done the 2 to 4 or 5 flow-based, focused hours. You've knocked out the 2 to 3 things that really matter today. Now go, recover, enjoy your life so that you're in the joy of the process, in the joy of your long game. You're here. You're not trying to be there. You're just enjoying where you're at. You know you're playing the game. If you have a long-term game, there's no competition against you because you're not trying to force it. That doesn't mean you're not making aggressive action. It doesn't mean you're not taking bold leaps towards your future self. It doesn't mean you're not being courageous. But if you're trying too hard to take over the world today, what that means is that you don't actually have a long-term vision. You can have a long-term vision. You can be hyper-aggressive. You can be courageous. You can make power moves today. But you can also live to fight another day. You can walk away and say, I know that if I have 5 really good days this week, that's better than having 1 insane day and then 4 days of being busted and broken. If you're trying too hard to knock out too much in the short term, that may probably lead you to really unhealthy mechanisms for doing that, whether that be like drugs or who knows what you'll do to try to create some fast result. But if you're playing the long game and if you're playing your own game and if you're no longer competing with other people, if you're what psychologists would call self-determined, and if you're intrinsically motivated, meaning you love your path, you know that your future self is bigger than you. You're actively preparing and creating your future self, but you're also really happy with where you're at. You're enjoying the process. You're failing forward and measuring backward, as some people would say. Then you can rock today out. You can be in flow. You can make meaningful progress towards your future self, and then you can be satisfied. You can walk away and you can say, tomorrow's going to be amazing as well. And then you can get consistent at creating very powerful, very important progress on a daily basis. 2 to 3 key outcomes. It could be if you're a writer, writing for 2 to 4 hours on that book in complete flow, no distractions, and then you walk away. Or you send a few key emails to potential collaborators. You do a few things. You measure your progress backwards, meaning you're reflecting on the progress you've made and you're enjoying and appreciating that progress. And then you set the big 3 for the next day. And then consistently over time, you're making the right moves. You're allowing yourself to recover. You're feeling joy in the process. You're running your own long-term race, which you're super excited about. You're not worried about anyone else. You're not trying to prove yourself to anyone else. You know that if you stick with this, and obviously you'll improve and you'll adapt your process along the way, but because you're playing such a long game and because you're doing it consistently rather than all crazy, you know how the compound effect works. You know that in the next few years, you're going to be skyrocketing exponentially. That's exactly what Kobe Bryant said, by the way. Kobe Bryant, in an interview with Lewis Howes, talked, and this was probably a year before he passed away, he talked about how his first year playing basketball, he was like 11 years old. He was horrible. He didn't make a single shot. But his dad told him that Kobe, whether you score 0 points or 60, I'm still going to love you. And then Kobe, what he realized from that is that he had the security to fail. He had the security to try, and that his dad would still love him. And that's when he started to take the long-term game. He started to really say, okay, I'm committed to this for the long haul. I don't need to try to prove myself to my dad. I don't need to try to get quick victories because I'm inadequate or insecure. I'm going to choose the game I want to play, and I'm going to master that game. And so once he felt secure in himself, he then set a long-term game. And when you have a long-term game, then you can really commit to a pure process. Then you can commit to actually getting really good at the fundamentals. You can get good at making the right progress rather than trying to force things. It's that whole difference between power versus force. If you've got the long game, if you're playing your own game, then you're no longer competing with anyone else. Then you're no longer trying to prove yourself to anyone else. Then you can enjoy where you're at. You can also make the furthest progress. You can be courageous. You can try to boldly attempt things, and you're fine failing yourself forward and then measuring yourself backwards against where you were before to see your own progress. So that's the challenge, is play the long game and then on a daily basis make massive, meaningful progress in a sustainable way, which then the compound effect over time takes over. If you're trying too hard to accomplish so much in a short period of time, I've got to ask you why. What is your motivation for that? Is it because you're insecure in yourself? Is it because you're trying to prove yourself? Is it because you don't really like yourself? If you're trying so hard to get to the next stage of your life, rather than really deciding what this one's all about, what's that for? If you're always trying to get to next, then you're never going to actually be anywhere. You're never going to be here, and it doesn't matter what that next milestone is, you're never going to actually be there. You're always going to be wanting the next thing, trying to prove yourself, and really what that proves is that there's a gaping hole inside of you, and a hole of knowing yourself, of deciding for yourself what success means to you, of running your own race, of enjoying your life, of focusing on what matters most. Set the long-term vision, get into a rhythm and a routine of being in flow, of putting the important before the urgent, of having 1, 2, or 3 major important things that you're trying to accomplish on a daily basis. Give yourself 2, 4, 5, even 6, 7 hours of flow, whatever you want. Research shows that the most productive countries in the world actually usually work less. They're usually working 4 to 6 hours a day, but that's focused, flow-based, important, intelligent work. It's not the busyness of just reactively responding to things or being distracted 90% of the time like most people. It's no. You sat down, you were in flow, you focused, you knocked out the things you planned to do, and then you were happy and you were comfortable and you walked away. And you went and recovered and you enjoyed your life. And then you lived to fight another day. You're going to come back and you're going to be there again. That's what Steven Pressfield would call a pro. Someone who's playing the long game. Someone who comes to work every day and they just crush it. They just do their job and they leave. They don't need to take over the world in one day. They're playing the long game and they know that they can get somewhere very far over the long term. That doesn't mean you're not making hyper-aggressive growth within the umbrella of your long-term vision. But that long-term vision removes the unnecessary anxiety. It also removes you having to prove yourself to anyone else. It also allows you to lay the better track and to love the process and to get deep into the right process, which is to do what you really need to do to become a master of your craft, mastery orientation, rather than overly obsessing on externals and proving yourself to others. So don't try to accomplish too much in one day. Know that you can accomplish way more than you think in a year if you're consistent and if you're applying the compound effect. And if you're having consistent days, weeks, months where you're in flow, focused on the right things, knocking out the right things, and then fully recovering. Then you're never burning out. You're loving your life. You're never burning out. You're in flow. you're in joy, you're happy with where you're at, yet you know your future self keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Every day is an investment in your future self. You don't need to burn it all down today. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Here's the next video that can help you become your best future self. Please like this video. Please push the thumbs up button. Please subscribe to this channel. And also down below, you can get access to my free peak state checklist. It's been downloaded by over 800,000 people, and it will help you get into a peak state first thing in the morning. Have an amazing day.